Hey, this is Joshua, and I want to share on a topic that I find really interesting today. I had a client session which inspired me to make this topic that I'm going to share with you, and so I'm kind of thinking about him in my mind as I talk about this. And so you could say this is intended for men, but really it's for anybody. I'm sure whoever watches this is for you. So the topic I want to share about, and this will be maybe part one, this will be by myself, but then the next part won't be by myself. So the topic is, what is intimacy? And the reason I'm starting this off by myself is because intimacy starts with ourselves. A lot of times we think, at the very, let's say, mainstream level, people relate the word intimacy obviously to, sex life. But that's just one way it looks. But what is intimacy really? I would just say honesty, clarity, openness. It could be called communication, but it starts with communication between yourself and yourself, right? Honesty with yourself, openness with yourself, transparency with yourself. Allowing ourselves to know what we think, allowing ourselves to know what we desire, allowing ourselves to feel what we're afraid of, allowing ourselves to feel angry, allowing ourselves to have acknowledgement, yeah, I'm really angry. This is all intimacy with ourselves, because if we are suppressing how we actually feel or what we actually think, if we are making it wrong or trying to get away from an experience, this is the opposite of intimacy. If we're strategizing about our internal coping mechanisms, this is the opposite of intimacy. This is why I'm not a huge fan of, let's say, traditional talk therapy, because usually this type of approach relies on coping mechanisms. If you feel like this, do this. If you want this feeling to go away, do this. And if we're trying to make a feeling go away, this is the opposite of intimacy. In the session that I referred to, that I just did with somebody, what I laid it out as strategy and intimacy are on opposite ends of this spectrum of closeness. And one of the keys here is recognizing it's not what we do, it's not what we say. There's no right formula for what words need to come out of our mouths or what behaviors must be taken, right? A lot of experts out there are saying, here's the thing to do, here's the thing to say, here's the right words, here's the right action. If you're following a prescription, it's not intimacy. That's synthetic. It's mimicking intimacy. But if you want the real thing, you have to have the willingness to be real. You have to have the willingness to take actions and say words that maybe require some courage and require some really deep digging or sitting with your experience in a way that is perhaps against the grain from what your default mode of being would be. So intimacy with yourself. I was also going to add, it's not the what you do or what you say, it's how you do it, how you say it. How are you breathing when you say the thing or when you do the thing? How is your tone when you say the words? How honest is it? How heartfelt is it? Right? If we're trying to meet a certain standard, if we're trying to check something off of a list, but I did this thing, but I said this thing, how could I not be right? Then we tend to completely ignore the how. The what being the masculine, the how being the feminine aspect. If we're not in touch with the feminine aspect, if we're not in touch with the how something is being created, how our decision is being generated, being delivered, if, especially in this type of, let's say, task-driven society, it can be really tempting and really easy to just not even prioritize the how in any way. But what if that is actually the main priority? See, just in the words that I'm saying to you right now, there's so much that's going unsaid, right? What is the energy? What is the space? What is the breathing like? How am I holding myself? What is my tone like? You might be wondering, what am I thinking that's not being said? What secrets are being kept? There's so much that isn't being said. And you may be able to feel that, and you may not be able to feel that. But whether you're aware of it or not, intellectually, your body knows. And you may or may not be sensitive to what your body knows. There's a huge spectrum in that. Some people are ultra sensitive to every energetic shift or every energetic input. And some people are not sensitive at all. I have this little electrode device that I use sometimes in sessions with people in person. And for some people, I can, it has a intensity rating of 1 through 10. Some people I can put it on 2 and they're like, whoa, this is so strong. And some people I can put it on 10 and they don't feel it at all, right? So there's huge spectrum of sensitivity to energies. So in general, women tend to be more sensitive to what is going on energetically, meaning if there's an emotional shift, if there's a trigger, if there's a secret, if there's something that's being held on to, if there's some kind of clenching happening, women tend to be more in tune and aware of that. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it gets interpreted correctly. One of the most common misinterpretations is they must not like me, or I must not be I must be doing something wrong. I must not be good enough because that person is clenching, right? So that's a misinterpretation. So somebody can attune to a clenching. Somebody can attune to some kind of withholding of honesty. And if there's real intimacy in the space, it becomes possible to share, oh, this is what the clenching was about. Oh, I was assuming this, or I was afraid of this. But most people are not letting an energy be an energy. Usually it becomes some kind of interpretation, and that's what actually creates drama, disconnection, lack of intimacy. So let's get back to the original question. What is intimacy when it comes to ourselves? For me, it's what am I willing to be with in myself? What am I rejecting in myself that I could potentially stop rejecting and invite that into my experience instead of making it into a problem? You might notice that between my words, I have a little bit more of a pause, or just I'm constantly attuning to what wants to come out and come through me, and it might not be the typical pattern of speaking that you're probably used to in other YouTube videos or just people talking in general. So this is me surfing the most pinpoint accurate intimacy that I am able to connect with in myself. If I were to force that to be different, if I were to try and make my speaking pattern match something that I think it's supposed to match, I'd be sacrificing this sense of being with myself, this sense of intimacy with myself. And I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to sacrifice that. And that's what I'm hoping you'll adopt for yourself too, is really understanding really being able to prioritize what it really means to have that type of intimacy with yourself, so that you can trust yourself, so that you can be confident, so that you can feel good, so that you can be relaxed, and then you can take your abilities, you can take your genius, you can take your gifts out into the world because you're not afraid of betraying yourself in some way. So this has been part 1 of what is intimacy. This is Joshua, and I'll look forward to seeing you in part 2, where Katie will join me. All right, take care.